Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Genuine Chit-Chat. This week, I'm joined by Janine Mercer of the ODDentity Podcast. Now, this chat is one for those who are not afraid of talking about the macabre. So we speak about a wide variety of things, but this is a two-part chat, so part 2 will be out next week. But just in brief, in part 1, we talk about collecting artifacts. There's lots of tales and stories that Janine tells of cool and crazy stuff she's done, which are just really interesting and things. We talk about sort of paranormal stuff. We talk about germs and phobias and fears. So all those sort of things is what's covered in part 1 of this chat. And as mentioned, Janine is part of the ODDentity Podcast. She's also a part of the up-and-coming The Vanishing Hitchhiker podcast. And she also has a website where it's basically a quarterly literature newsletter, for lack of a better word, called Corpus Review. So I really recommend everyone checks those out. Those are all in the sort of descriptions below. And yeah, this is just a really fun, great chat. Now, before we get started, there'll be a quick promo for the Witch Murderer podcast. They're a part of the Brit pod scene, much like Genuine Chit Chat is, and it's basically true crime, but with a twist. There's not really much else to add, you'll hear it in the promo, so yeah, check those guys out. And that's just about it from me, guys, at the moment. I'll be back at the end of the chat just to talk about the usual sort of rambly nonsense, what's coming up, what I've got planned, blah, 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 if you're interested in that sort of tomfoolery. But otherwise, you can follow me on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, generally more active on Instagram. And if you like tortoise videos, I have a pet tortoise, and I usually post them as my story every few days or so. So there's that to look forward to. Anyway, enough from me, guys. As I say, I'll speak to you at the end of the podcast. And yeah, I hope you enjoy the chat with Janine Mercer.
Hi, I'm Holly.
And I'm Gemma, and together we are the co-hosts of the podcast Witch Murderer. Each week we discuss 2 murders, and we try and focus more on the victim's perspective.
Oh my god, that's not who I thought was going to die.
Let's just blame it all on Tom Cruise.
Yeah, math stumps me at every turn, even in dismemberment.
We all know she was cut in half.
He had projectile pooped.
Oh no!
The entire room.
Will they ever get along?
God damn it. Fucking get along, eat an ice cream cone.
You're gonna make so many enemies, and I love it.
How many times do I have to say, if you're gonna murder people, don't keep a fucking diary?
Don't keep a diary.
I really didn't want to be frozen to death. When were you born, honey?
No, I'm not telling you. I don't like the thought of somebody who's selling ice cream being that angry inside. And then we have ourselves a little debate at the end about which murderer we would want to kill us if we had to choose.
If we had to choose.
It's a game of which would you rather.
Exactly. And if you fancy playing that along with us, you can find us on Spotify, Stitcher, iTunes. You can also listen to us on Audio Boom and our website, witchmurderer.com.
And you can always get in contact with us at Twitter and Instagram at witchmurderer, and also witchmurderer@gmail.com.
So hopefully you'll be listening to us soon.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Welcome to Genuine Chit Chat, where we have honest conversations with interesting people. And I'm your host, Mike Burton. And I am here with Janine Mercer. Janine, it's wonderful to have you on here, and obviously you're the host of the ODDentity Podcast. There's an upcoming podcast as well that you're involved with, and you do the website Corpus Review. So welcome to Genuine Chit Chat. How are you doing?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I'm good. Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. Now, your show, the primary one at the moment that is out and things, ODDentity Podcast, what sort of things do you sort of talk about? So like, what's a little bio almost of the show?
Oh gosh. I mean, it's really difficult to kind of put it in a few words.
It's a lot of variation, I know.
Yeah.
As many words as you want.
Well, I mean, the ODDentity Podcast evolved from what was known as the Haunt Heads Podcast, which was essentially a podcast for people who were into the creepy and the strange and the macabre. And then when my first co-host, Mimi, decided that she was going to be done with podcasting, I decided that with my second co-host, we were going to kind of work through that and rebrand a little bit. Mm-hmm. Because I was not only, we weren't only just addressing, haunted places and whatever. We were also addressing the weird stuff, the creepy stuff, the, immurement, for example, the process of being walled up alive.
Okay. Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah.
I mean, but that's not paranormal. So
no, of course.
So we were
just strange things. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it's adjacent. So we were kind of trying to incorporate a lot of different things into what we were doing. And we came up with the Identity Podcast because, I mean, we're talking about the odd and the strange, but we and ourselves were odd and strange. So it was just two odd people talking about odd things, and then it kind of sort of came together. But yeah, I mean, we talk about anything from haunted places to serial killers to, like I said, random practices like immurement or safety coffins, or I did a piece about L'inconnue de la Seine, the unknown woman of the Seine, or the face of CPR Annie.
Oh, okay,
like
right.
One of the most, she's called one of the most kissed faces in the world.
Oh, okay.
Because that mask is, I mean, that's what they use for all the CPR dummies.
I see.
But yeah, I mean, there's just, I mean, we talk about anything and everything. So it's really just a haven for people who are odd in themselves or enjoy odd things, I guess, is appropriate.
I think that's going to be great for a lot of my audience because, I've had a lot of interesting people on. I mean, that's the whole kind of point. I don't mind if someone is, in air quotes, weird. It's just like two consistent things throughout my entire life is that I've been told that I talk too much and that I'm weird. That's just the two straight off the bat. And, I've even I grow facial hair. My mustache is blonde. So even my own facial hair is immediately like, I'm like 25. It's like blonde there and completely dark down there. And it's like, I have had people come up to me when I'm out and be like, do you bleach your mustache? It's like, why would I just bleach the mustache out of what? No, it's like that little tiny, it's something I do not control in any way, shape or form, just the pigmentation of the color of my hairs immediately makes me just only obviously in the last, several years I've been growing facial hair. Okay. God knows I tried a lot longer than that. But it's before I just this horrible little goatee in college for ages. It was terrible. But when I finally grow this and it's like, oh, that's one tiny little weird thing. And I always find that weird is just another word for different. And I don't find that weird has a negative connotation to it. You know what I mean? Obviously you clearly don't, because that's a part of the bio.
Yeah, well, right. I mean, and I think that was a big thing too. Like I've always been that person, like that weird person. Like I know that the audience can't see right now, but I mean, behind me I have taxidermy and circus memorabilia, and on the other wall there's just like a bunch of like nerdy collectible stuff, like
Funko Pop. Love it. I heard you talking about that before.
Yeah, right. I mean, they should be paying me for how much I'm buying. But like behind me I have a collection of like poison bottle labels from like the 1800s. So like I come upon all of this weird stuff and I'm like, I'm weird. This is weird too. Great. Let's put it in a room. And my wife is really funny. She's like, that's fine. If you keep it in the room, then you can keep it. But if it goes anywhere else, then forget it. It's gone. So.
Oh, that's amazing. I've got loads of little knickknacks myself as well with, there's not quite, I just like, I do, this is a peculiar thing that I do, but I find that other people do this sort of thing as well in some places. When I go traveling and things, often I like to go to like a beach or something and find like just a rock that I just like, you know what I mean? And just bring that back from things. And when I was younger, I used to like finding keys. I find it's like there's a slight magic in when you're younger, you find a key and you're like, what could this be for? Like any door in this whole city, if not anywhere else. And it's like I used to let my imagination sort of run away with me. And I've got this really rusty old flat key that's just, it couldn't be used for anything now at all. You try and put it in a lock, it would just snap. But it's like, it's just so cool to have, that I love those little collectible things. I mean, where did you get some of the objects of your the room, I suppose?
Oh gosh. I mean, I've done a little bit of traveling. I haven't done a ton of traveling. But like, for example, when I went to Rome, I was in Italy for a while on a Franciscan pilgrimage, which left me feeling more like a Satanist than I have been in my entire life, but that's a completely different story. But in this little tiny shop in the piazza in front of the temple of it's called the Temple of Minerva, but it's not. It's in Assisi, Italy. It's actually the Temple of Castor and Pollux. Right. But there was this tiny little shop there. This tiny little man was like 3.5 feet tall, and he was selling all these little knickknacks. And on one of the shelves was this little, it was like a Roman like war helmet, like the classic war helmet.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And I was like, that's really cool, because I'd been, I'm a writer and I'm a poet, so I spent the bulk of my time when I was in Italy just writing poetry, just generating it. And when I saw that little knickknack on the shelf, I was like, I just finished writing a poem about how the streets ran red with blood during, during the wars and, whatever. And all of these cobblestones have kind of been steeped in this ancient history. And I was like, that is the perfect, and it's not creepy. It's not weird.
No, it's amazing.
It was the perfect artifact for me to bring back. And I think that that's a big part of why I collect and why I'm attracted to certain things. Because when you collect artifacts, you're basically, it's almost like you're building your own story.
That's
because long after I'm gone, there will be a story. Granted, it will just be contained in this room. I mean, let's be honest, but people can come to this place and be like, oh, she was interested in this, or she found this here, or, I mean, it's very much it's like feeling connected to the places that you've been in, and also anchored in the place that you are. Because I can go to any place in this room and pick something up and be like, oh yeah, I remember I went there, whatever, and visit that place again, but still be stationary. So I don't know. I just I like collecting little weird knickknacks. I got a little stone from, you were talking about stones before. I got a little stone from Zunantinich.
Well, I'm not sure where that is.
That's in Belize, in Central America.
Right. Okay, cool.
So I spent, I think it was a little over a week in Belize on a service trip. We went there to bring some copies of a children's book to some of the kids down there in the schools. And then we also helped to paint some of the schoolrooms. And also we helped at the Belize Zoo to do some painting there. But I went to Zunantinich with a larger group, and it's a large Mayan temple.
Oh, okay. Right.
It's just it's an amazing structure. It's so fantastic. And it's surrounded by allspice trees.
Okay.
Which you can pick the leaves off the allspice trees and rub them between your hands and get the smell of the allspice. It's very pungent.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's got a very unique smell. And I mean, all of this, ancient structure just around you, it's just insane. And then guys with semi-automatic weapons who are preventing you from taking anything
I see.
in that place. So I picked up a little stone as I was leaving.
Nice.
Not from the actual, Mayan temple. It's not illegal.
I did something very, very similar. I went to I've been obviously England's inside of Europe, and I've been around Europe quite a bit in my life. I was quite lucky. My parents took me around, but I'd never been outside of Europe until this year. Well, I went to Italy this year, funnily enough, as well.
Nice.
And also I went to Chichen Itza. Well, I went to Mexico, and in Mexico I saw Chichen Itza.
Yeah.
And obviously mine as well and things. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I went around that, and obviously I didn't take a bit of rubble from the actual the pyramid itself. I just take a big block home, but I just around the grounds of it's like a bit of history, isn't it? It's you can when you're around places like that, you can, as you say, it's a connection of you kind of get the two sides of the coin of the memory almost. When you pick up something from where you've been, you're like, well, this is a reflection of where I've been, what I like, the sort of aesthetics of it as well. But also when you, as you say, you go to it, you kind of remember the other side of it, the memory of where it was and how you got to it and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
There's so many cool things like that.
All of the footsteps that have traversed that particular patch of
millions
land.
And millions.
I mean, there's no tchotchke that you can find in a shop that's going to have that sort of energy. And I think that's another thing that I'm attracted to is the energy of certain objects. I have an old straight razor that belonged to my wife's, I believe it was her great grandfather.
Okay, right, that's interesting.
But we also have his glasses and like a set of keys and some sort of a stamp or something for letters. But I mean, when you hold those things in your hands, I mean, he must have shaved with that straight razor thousands of times, but the energy that's connected to that one little piece. I mean, I never met the man. I never knew the man. But when you look at that piece and you see the wear on the handle, you can just tell that was a valued possession and it was used thousands of times. And, now it's a part of my collection, and it's a part of my artifacts or my life. It's just kind of cool.
I've got something. It's slightly different. It's not quite as used, but essentially, most of my listeners know this by now already. But my dad passed away 6 years ago now, and he always wore. I usually wear it. My neck's been playing up a little bit on my neck, so I took it off. But I normally wear a St. Christopher pendant, you know, the little coin thing with St. Christopher, I think Jesus on his back. It's a good luck charm thing. I'm not a religious individual, but he always wore one. And I remember one time we went to, when I was like 10, went to France and he didn't wear it. And I remember being like, Dad, why didn't you wear that thing? And he wasn't religious either. It was just like a good luck charm. And I was like, why didn't you wear the thing? He's like, I just forgot to. You know, I took it off of this, I forgot to put it back on. And then a car broke down by the border. And I was like... That I was like, that's a little luck thing. And then my dad then bought me for the following Christmas my own one. And then since he passed away, I've now got his one, which I'm going to give to sort of and I'm hoping to kind of do a little thing, like even if they don't wear it all the time, if they've got that thing, you know, if I buy my kid one and then either I can buy my kid one and then it'll be 3 going around the generations or that sort of thing. It's just an item, an artifact, something. That's one of the most exciting things about going to museums is human history and seeing some of the artifacts that are so old. You see things that are human, and also, as you say, like when you see rocks and things, like there are certain stones here that have been around for longer than people have. It's like, what? That's mental.
Well, and that was, I mean, when I was in Italy, because I was there on a pilgrimage, I was there with a Franciscan group, which they were Capuchins, so essentially Christians. But they made such a big deal out of us not taking anything, like rocks, or like we did this whole thing where we went up to the highest point in Assisi in Italy, and we were each to take a rock and carry that rock back down. And then we took it into like this little prayer circle or whatever. And then we were told that we had to leave the rock there because it was not our rock. And for me, I mean, I was like, well, first off, I'm the only child. So I'm a little spoiled.
Same.
just a little bit, like a healthy amount spoiled. So I was like, well, but I put all this work into it to getting this rock back. I mean, it wasn't a small rock. It wasn't a big rock. I didn't like pick up a boulder or anything and carry it down with me, but I was still like, okay, you know, I did the work. I put the effort in. I brought this back, you know, whatever. And one of the monks was like, well, no, because you didn't create that rock first. And I was like, okay, well, I understand that I don't have the ability to create rocks, but at the same time, like, this was a memorable experience for me. And because I'm so connected to artifacts, I thought, well, I'll take that home. I'll put it on my desk. You know, it'll be a reminder of this time that it was a beautiful night. It was an amazing hike. Because the tallest point in Assisi is, I mean, it's a ways. And I am not in the best of shape. So for me to get up there in the first place with like asthma and, you know, anxiety and whatever, I mean, that was an effort for me. And they were just like, no, you know, you have to leave it there. We'll bring them back in the morning. And I'm like, all right, I guess so. But it never really made much sense to me. Yeah. Did
you end up sneakily grabbing a rock, or did you leave them all be?
I actually left them there.
You did. You respected what they asked of you.
Well, I was basically like shamed into
giving up your
leaving
memento.
The rock there. I was like, I don't want people to think that I'm like this horrible person who's gonna like steal a rock or whatever from
just come over
collection.
To native land and stealing people's rocks.
In the hostel, just creep down there at like 3:00 in the morning and abduct a rock from this pile and bring it back to the States. Like, no, you know.
Bring back that as contraband. Yeah, that's out of all the things people smuggle across the border. It's like, what is she bringing across? She brought a rock, not the rock. No.
Well, you know what I did manage to get across? Ooh. They have a salami there. They have all of these little vino and formaggio and salumi bars just all around Trevi Fountain. And so you can take your picture at Trevi Fountain, and then you can go and sit in the bars and have like different kinds of salami and wine and cheese. And so I went in there and I'm looking around, and there's all these salamis hanging from the ceiling, and they're round and they're attached by like a string, and they're thrown over like the rafters, and they look like testicles. So I'm like, what are they selling, salami or giant testicles? Like, what is this? So I go up and broken English, broken Italian, ask him quanto costo, salumi, salumi, and I'm pointing up at the rafters, and he's like, "Oh, donkey balls." And I said, "Donkey balls? Did you just say that in English?" Like plain English? And he was like, "Oh, yeah, donkey balls." And so I bought donkey balls and smuggled them back in my suitcase.
That is an incredible thing. That should be on some sort of t-shirt or something, that you smuggled donkey balls back in your suitcase.
Smuggled, yeah.
Wow, I can't say I've ever smuggled anything that exciting across. I don't think I've even come to contact with any animals' testicles in any form. I haven't eaten anything that exotic or... I mean, I like different meats and things, stuff like that. Yeah. But how I assume you ate it. How was it?
Oh, it was very good. Very, very good. And we had it it's dried. So, you can shave off however much you want. And we had it for like a month and a half.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But it was fantastic. And the funniest part of that entire story is as I was coming back through the airport in, I believe it was Pennsylvania, they had a dog there that was sniffing for contraband. And I was like, "Oh, they're gonna catch me, that they're gonna take my donkey balls, whatever." And the dog, so there was another girl who went with me on the trip. There were several other people that went with me, but this one girl who was heading back the same way that I was had a banana in her bag, and the dog tagged on the banana. And so he was preoccupied, and so I managed to smuggle in my donkey balls.
That is incredible. The banana and the balls. It's amazing as well, because the imagery that goes along with those two different objects.
Well,
it's like, one was causing you distraction that way, the other went the other way.
Right, yeah. Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
That's a good throwing off technique. Well, that's how you know now. If you ever want to smuggle anything else through customs, just take a banana as well.
Well, have a friend act as a decoy and be like, this is, I'm sorry, I brought a banana in. I shouldn't have. And she had to go in a separate line and she had to declare her banana.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I felt like I almost would have wanted to just eaten it there, but I suppose you still have the skin. So you're still kind of like, guess can't
right.
really.
You have to declare the skin. Yeah, I don't know. But...
bananas are fairly good, but they're not like that. Whether it's like, do you want to wait extra half hour in the queue? It's like, not really. It's just a banana. I can probably go out of the corner and just get another one outside there.
Yeah.
That's a very interesting fruit to go. What sort of on the subject, sort of looping back to a degree of like sort of your podcast and sort of the strange things focus. Like, have you been to any sort of locations that you find are strange? I'll quickly say, because in England, obviously, we have a lot of incredibly old buildings and things, obviously castles and etc. The civilizations have been here for thousands of years. So when I love going to museums and I love going to old castles and I love going to museums within castles, that's the jackpot. And just having all of the old things and stuff like that. But obviously America, for the most part, is a lot younger, apart from the obviously sort of the mines and things like that. What are the sort of not quite middle ground, but the older parts of America sort of that you've been to that you enjoy? Like, are there any old houses or sort of towns even that are quite still have that vibe?
Well, I remember when I think it was like 12 or 13 years old. I wound up taking a trip with my grandparents to a place called Belle Isle, which is in Newfoundland, where I grew up. And they had a huge iron ore mine. I think there was like 3 or 4 mines in one place, and one of the mines was open so that you could actually go down into it. So you went there and you paid your money, and then somebody took you down, and you got the opportunity to mine.
What, get some ore?
Yeah. It was coal, but
okay.
You still got,
it's still amazing.
You still got the, little pick, and you got to pick. And actually my grandparents still have the little baggie that I got.
Oh, that's so cool.
But yeah, it's like this huge mine. There was like 40, 50 people there. You take a ferry across there, and you go into kind of this really old, it feels old. I suppose it's not super old, but there's something about the fact that, all these people went down underground to mine this valuable resource, and a lot of them lost their lives. And it's considered to be very haunted.
Right.
And it's really interesting, actually, because as somebody who believes in the paranormal, but also has a healthy level of skepticism, because I think it's important that you have a healthy level of skepticism. Otherwise, you just believe anything that anybody tells you, and you're just, what's the use, But I mean, I remember going down into that mine and like it's pitch black and there's just a guy leading you with a lantern. And I mean, this was in the 90s. So, you know, they weren't really concerned about, well, but what if people slip and die and fall into a hole? It was just like, this is tourism. So, I mean, we went there for several summers because there wasn't really a whole lot to do on the island when I was a teenager. So I wanted to do other things that did not involve my family. But I remember one time we went there, it was late in the summer. They were just getting ready to close. And we were down, oh God, I don't even remember how many, like 150 feet or something like that, which is, it's creepy. Because there's nothing around you except all of these other people also shivering in the dark. And just out of nowhere, I kind of felt like a little push. Like somebody had like tapped me on the shoulder or something, and looked around. There was nobody around me, and everybody was kind of progressing further. And my grandparents were yelling at me because I was taking my time. And as I get further and further and further down into the mine, I start to hear like little whispers, not like full-fledged voices, but like little whispers. And couldn't make out what they were saying, had no idea. Assumed it was just the echoes of like voices ricocheting off the walls because it's kind of a weird place. But I think that was probably like my first experience with a place that I think is haunted, you know? And also, I mean, years later, there's still, I'm also one of those people that I don't know if I get attached to ghosts or ghosts get attached to me. But there is absolutely a miner that I see in my house now.
All right.
I've seen for years that has like the full, like the wide brim mining hat with the big lamp on the front that they had to light, you know, with the actual flame on it.
Yeah.
And he wanders around my house now, and he's been with me for years. I'm in Milwaukee now. And there are no mining, you know, there's no mining happening here because Milwaukee is built on a swamp. So it's like, where did he come from? Well, I mean, there's only one place that he could have come from, but yeah. So I consider that place to be probably one of the places that introduced me to the paranormal and introduced me to the idea that we're not alone here. You know, like there's something more, whether you see it, you know, on the level that you are in some way, or you can see it beyond that. I feel like there's definitely, you know, there's something going on for sure.
Yeah, I mean, with my sort of personal opinion on it, I'm not sure if I've discussed it in the podcast or not, especially is I used to be, it's quite strange. I used to be really, really into the paranormal things when I was more young, when I was in secondary school, which was between the ages of 10 and 16. I used to read a lot of the books I used to read about aliens and things, which we can get onto another point in this conversation potentially. But with ghosts and things, I used to read quite a lot about ghosts and I got really into it. And then around my teenage, sort of mid-teenage years and things, I became a lot more... I was becoming more of an atheist as well. So I was a lot more hardline against religion. And then I kind of said no to all the... To quote it, like woo-woo is the way I would have almost phrased it. You know, sort of anything that isn't strictly 100% scientifically proven is completely wrong in any way, shape or form. And it's like, I don't believe that now. But that mindset. And from then, I've kind of slowly progressed away from that hardline no. And I read a book actually called Something Funny Happened on the Way to Heaven, I think it's called. And it's by a gentleman called Corey Taylor. And he's the lead singer and vocalist of a band called Slipknot. They're a very big metal band. And he's also a singer of Stone Sour, and he's written a couple of other books. He's written about religion, these sort of things. He's an atheist, and he says that he has had paranormal activities. He says he knows how crazy it sounds, but he's experienced ghosts and things. And when I first read that, which is years ago now, I was like, okay, well, I respect this guy's opinion when it comes to his previous book was about religion and sort of the atheistic mindset and things, etc. And I was like, okay, but he believes that, and he actually tries to explain it in his own kind of way. He rationalizes it, which is everyone's built up of, everyone's alive, has got energy going through them and things. That's how people are. Maybe when you die, a sort of imprint or capturing of that energy potentially gets formed in some other way. You know, energy can't ever be destroyed. It, you know, only ever redirects, only ever transfers. So it's like, well, if, you know, I'm not necessarily saying this is something I completely believe, but I don't not believe it. I'm kind of like, if I experienced it, maybe that would explain it more. But it's like, if you die and you just, a part of your energy, the amount of energy that you've got just disperses, and a tiny part of it gets connected to one part of your synapses, which is just how you remember yourself looking or something. And that can just do a degree of astral projection for a certain amount of time, or when certain people see it at certain times, any sort of thing that could create the right atmosphere for it, and the imprint, and that could then go from there. I mean, even when you tell people about like memories and things and stuff, memories are just energy stored in very complicated, strange organic pathways and things.
Right.
So when you get deeper into this sort of line of thinking that I'm going down, is obviously with the paranormal, is even with a scientific mind purely trying to be rational about it, and then you go down it is energy and the laws of thermodynamics and things like that, and we can't see all of the light spectrum, that's very clear. We can't see ultraviolet light, we can't hear everything, dog whistles, for example. So there's obviously levels of reality that we can't fully experience. And obviously, what if blind animals that are born blind, what is it like for them not to see? Well, they could never understand what seeing is. They sense with other things. There's many senses that we wouldn't have, or don't have, or may not know we have. So when I go deeper into that sort of line of thinking, I become less of a skeptic and more of a sort of, I'm very interested by it. I'm not necessarily subscribing to it being true or false in my mind necessarily. It's more just, at the very least, it's a perspective of what someone experienced at that time. And I'm not I do not disbelieve that you see the minor, whether or not I believe it is directly because of that person passing away. If it was the energy of the caves, it maybe was something else. I mean, any different of these things could be something. But however one even has a perception on their own reality and their life's own meaning, that's a big whole, that's a big thing about perspective. This experience of yours is a perspective of what you saw, and that's very interesting to me. And I like hearing what I like about your podcast and some of the episodes that I listen to. I really like the fact that it's not just, as you stated at the start of this, everything. Everything's right. Every ghost you've ever seen is completely 100% there. Every place you go, it's more of a kind of, either I felt this thing or saw this thing or this thing sort of happened, and then you look into it, you go into sort of the research from the Times, you go into what people said about it after that, and you really do flush out some of the ideas about it being a more, I don't want to say rational because that makes it sound like patronizing, but you know what I mean, that sort of more scientific view on it, and I really like what you do with that in your show.
Yeah. I mean, like I said before, I feel it is very important to have a level of healthy skepticism. And as far as, haunted locations and seeing ghosts and planes, and I mean, it gets very complicated and very strange very quickly. But when I'm trying to explain to people kind of what I'm seeing or what I'm feeling in any given situation, I usually use the movie Mirrors as an example.
Right.
I don't know if have you seen the movie with Kiefer Sutherland?
No, I'm afraid I haven't actually seen that film.
Okay.
It's bad for I'm quite a movie buff and I haven't seen that. I do apologize.
No, it's fine. I mean, it's not the best movie. You're not missing a ton. But there's this idea that we exist on one side of the mirror and they, quote unquote, these otherworldly creatures, beings, demons, ghosts, whatever you want to call them, exist on the opposite side of the mirror. And kind of the cool thing that they do in that movie is everything is backwards on the other side of the mirror. So it's kind of a kitschy way to, explain it away. But I like that idea that there's a separation between it. And some people can see into that mirror and see the flipped image. And some people look into that mirror and just see a mirror or just see their own reflection. And it has nothing to do with like your level of self-absorbance or, what have you. It just has everything to do with, like you said, perspective and kind of where you were when it happened. And this is what it was like. And this is, and that was your experience. And I think that that's kind of one of the beautiful things about human beings is the fact that we have so many different experiences, but we perceive them in so many different ways. I think that's always a very cool idea, a very cool concept to me.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, all life, I believe, kind of is just one's own perspective on, the Earth is spinning, millions upon billions of different things are happening with nature, with the planet, with each other, and all life is just your one's quite narrow view of X amount of time as a perception of where it kind of is going. And that's kind of what it is mainly, is life is all about the moments and the experiences. And with those perceptions and things, it is very interesting, that sort of idea of the mirror realm, or the sort of that shift, because it's also, you know, I want to clarify before saying this, I haven't done what I'm about to say, but there's a drug called DMT, which people speak of, and they say they take it and they go into this other realm and these beings, and there's this strange thing that a huge amount of people who do it explain the same sort of thing. Okay, and it's like some people who've gone through intense meditation and gone through sort of, you know, an incredible amount of time learning to do these things and doing it for hours and hours and hours a day, have been able to get to the same states that one could get to from doing DMT. It's quite rare, but that sort of idea. Right. And they speak to these sort of beings on the other side of things. And once again, I've not experienced this. This is what people have said, but it's like, even there's quite a few connections, even if one doesn't subscribe to the idea that there is another realm that we can't see or can't perceive or can't feel, or is on sort of, there's a barrier, there's a separation between us and this thing, is that there are some, even if one wouldn't agree that that is happening, one can't deny that the fact that there are so many connections. There are so many places in religion and history and all kinds of other places where there's other realms. That's a very common thing through the history of human mythos and other things in a lot of things, I say.
Right. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The fact that, you know, I can kind of sit in my bedroom and look out into the hall and see something peeking around the corner. I mean, people might think that that's just insane. You know, like, what? Well, you should try to get your medication adjusted, because obviously there's something else going on there. And although I understand that, you know, schizophrenia is a very real thing and people do suffer from that and people do see and hear voices, there is also a huge community out there that will absolutely back up what I'm saying and have had these experiences. So, I mean, it's not just me being crazy and, you know, whatever. And I think that's kind of the great thing about, you know, the whole podcasting craze. You know, everybody's just kind of going nuts about that. And, you know, well, everybody has a podcast now, you know, and everybody wants to tell what their version of the world is or how they see it. And I mean, whether or not people are interested in what I have to say, or, you know, whatever, or ever.
I feel the same.
I always joke on my podcast that we have like 3 fans. So hello to the 3 fans. But yeah, I mean, it's just, you know, you want to put that information out there because you want to find like-minded people who have also had those experiences. And I've had so many experiences like that I just can't explain, that have freaked me out to no end, that I still haven't come to terms with. But I mean, that's just the world as I see it, and the world as it is to me, you know, and it might be completely different to you, but yeah, it's just.
Yeah, well, people see through, like, one idea that I've thought about, I don't know if it's been disproven scientifically or not, but it's still a nice idea, is when you can see in, like, when you look at the colour yellow, you and I both look at something that is yellow. We've both been told our entire lives that is yellow, but you don't know if you're seeing my version of the colour blue. But you've been, everyone's been pointing at that for the whole time, saying it's yellow, just like, you see what I mean? Like, a sort of thing. So in that idea, you could think of, okay, maybe that's a part. Obviously, we know that different people see different versions of the light spectrum, in a sense, you know, can see different lights. There's one woman, I think, who can see different colours to anyone else that we know of.
Oh, sure.
And it's all these crazy things that people can do. And it's like, there is so much that we can't actually see or experience and things.
Yeah.
And these minor, everyone is different. Like, I have eczema and I'm allergic to pollen and things and blueberries randomly for some reason. So it's like certain things, like, but my mum isn't and my dad wasn't, and all these, you know, there's loads of people who are and are not and things like that. And it's like, well, everyone's different, even though we're biologically sort of, you know, physically the same in air quotes. But it's like, we have so many little tiny odd tweaks and differences. How many of those can one not measure at the moment? Like, you being able to see, you know, being able to see other things people can't see. It's like, obviously there's the two sides of the coin. It could be either you are seeing things that aren't there, or you're seeing things that other people cannot perceive. And there's not really, I can't explicitly prove one way or the other. And I find that when people are so shutting things down so much, you know, they're so much like, nope, that couldn't possibly be anything other than that. It's like, even if you don't fully subscribe to it, it's nice to hear about what the experience is. It doesn't take away from that if you don't fully necessarily believe that. If someone experiences something, not everyone who goes out for the walk in the woods is going to have the same experience. Some people are going to hate it. My mum does not like camping or anything like that. I love it. It doesn't mean camping's bad. It doesn't mean that I can't tell my mum about the fun I had camping, and mum can tell me the fun that she had staying in a hotel or something. But it's, you know what I mean? And so that's one of the things that I like about, as you say, with the podcasting world, it's having a lot more people being free and uncensored and being able to kind of say these things they want. But obviously, if you or I, for example, try to pitch our podcast to a TV network, there is no way at the current level that we'd get even close to it. But because we've done this and we've gone, we're going to do it off our own back, and we're just going to record things and put them online, regardless of how many or people are listening or anything like that. It's just connecting with people, and you and I having this conversation. Like, if I stop podcasting tomorrow, it's the amount of conversations I've had that are just really cool and they have fun memories from it, makes it worth it. And I'm sure you feel similarly. Yeah.
I mean, for some reason, I've connected with a lot of people who have, I mean, I guess I can't really say for some reason, because obviously I have a certain demographic, and, I attract odd people and am odd in myself. But I came upon this one other person who wrote me a message because I'd passed comment on a past podcast that for whatever reason, I don't know why this is, but if I look at a number, it is automatically associated with a color.
Okay.
So like the number 5 is always yellow. The number 4 is always purple. The number 6 is always orange. The number 2 is always black. And for whatever reason, I've just always seen those colors when I've seen those numbers. And so this person wrote me and was like, oh my God, I can't believe that there's another person in the world that actually sees colors as associated to numbers. And I was like, yeah, ever since I was a really little kid, I've been like, oh yeah, the number 5 is always yellow. And even amazing. When I was numbering, you'll get this reference because, you're in the UK, but the exercise books that they call them notebooks here in the US, and it's a bastardization in my opinion, but the exercise books that we used to have to cut in half for elementary school programs, you used to have to number them for different subjects. And my art notebook was always the 5th notebook, and it was always yellow. And if it was not yellow, then I'd be so anxious about it because it doesn't match. And this person was just like, yeah, God, just thank you so much for saying that is actually a thing and somebody else actually experiences it. Because for years, her husband had just been like, what is the matter with you? Why do you think this? And wow. I mean, I got on the podcast one day and it was just a passing, 2 seconds, literally. The number 5 is always yellow. And we moved on to something else. And then she wrote me this big long email. It was like a 1.5-page email. And I was like, that's insane. But
that is amazing.
That's part of it, is connecting to other people. And maybe not necessarily figuring out that they're just as odd as you are, but, figuring out that you have similar things in common and, what have you. So.
Yeah, I think that's incredible. I'd not thought of that sort of thing, but yeah, association with, people have associations with all kinds of things, the big experiment of Pavlov's dog. Obviously, you ring the bell and he has food, and then you ring the bell and no food and he salivates anyway. That's not quite the same thing, but it's a sort of association in a sense can be brought together by certain things. And, some people do have strong associations with certain colors. There's obviously some people just have a favorite color, and it's quite when you think about it, being a person, obviously you can try and track down a lot of our behavior to sort of social standings, and a lot of it is sort of power, money, how high on the sexual hierarchy, all these sorts of complicated things I'm not necessarily going into, but social status, a lot of it. But a lot of those things you can go down to evolutionarily or with Darwinianism or any sort of other psychology, any sort of these things you can look into with a certain lens.
Right.
But then when you look at why do people have favorite colors? It's not really necessarily a reason. Maybe I'm being quite shallow-minded, but I'm just maybe there isn't just a reason. And I think that with humans, one of the most fun things about us is just these all, as you kind of touched upon earlier, these little weird differences about all of us that are just inexplicable. Why do you see things in those colours? Well, I don't know why. It's just something that is your part of your experience. And I wonder how many people's perceptions of things would be so intriguing and different if everyone could kind of be fully open and share 100%, if you know what I mean, of what they're seeing.
Right. Well, and it makes me wonder too. I mean, there are so many different, there's a word for everything now. Like, you have this affliction. Oh, well, that's this. Or, you have this experience. Oh, that's that. But I mean, like those people who, can't look at a pomegranate without freaking out because it has all these little holes in it.
I used to have that.
Yeah. I mean,
genuinely.
Like, you can't look down into the plug hole without having the heebie-jeebies because that's a drain for American listeners. Anyway, whatever. But yeah, I mean, you see all of these little, concentric holes and they're all the same size. And it makes you very unnerved. But I mean, there's so many people that have that experience and they don't know why. They've just always had it. And it might last, it might not. I'm assuming that you no longer have this.
I kind of push myself. I used to see it a lot. I saw it a lot. My friend used to always send me photos of, people's with hands they're photoshopped with loads of holes in, and there's plants that are like super zoomed in of the holes. He used to send me that quite a lot, and eventually I just like, you know what, I can't have this. That's what I used to. Right. But occasionally, randomly, I'll just be doing something and then I'll see something like violently, like a flash image of it. And I'm like, I don't want to see that, but I'm generally okay with it now.
Yeah, I mean, I've had friends that they put their hand down on something that has a lot of even like a chain or something, and they'll pick their hand up after a while and realize that that's happened and just lose their minds.
Oh, wow.
Because it's on them now. It's like, I just don't,
I think that's it. Like one of my biggest fears is, with there's realistic fears, which is me being dropped in the middle of the ocean and just left there. Like that's a biggest realistic, air quotes, realistic fear. When I think of like crazy, like not fun, that sounded really bad, but like if you want to go into some of these worlds where like superheroes are a thing or like this crazy stuff happen, like I don't want there to be a zombie apocalypse. But there was a part of me at some point, when I was watching Walking Dead a lot and watching all the zombie movies, when that was a big thing, a part of me was like, because I was a teenager as well, like, it's kind of cool if there'd be a zombie apocalypse, wouldn't there? Because I'd clearly survive, even though I probably wouldn't. But like all these, sometimes you just want that extra bit of speciality, that sort of flair in sort of the universe. And one of the things I've thought of is if zombification or anything like that came to be, it would be one of those horrible things to experience, like feeling your body not become you anymore, being like infected by something sort of crazy like that. Like I think that's probably almost completely off topic. Well, there's no topics here, but it's exactly, it's just bouncing to and from. But that's what made me think of like having, you've seen I watched a lot of zombie films, horror films, etc. And someone gets infection there and it starts to like slowly spread over them and things. It's like that is one of my biggest things that gives me the heebie-jeebies in the way of putting it. What about yourself? Do you have any sort of horrendous, crazy, weird fears? That sounds like I'm going to come to your house and force you to do. If you have a fear of spiders, I'm going to flood your room with spiders. No. I mean, I have a lot of similar fears. I never learned how to swim, so interesting.
Drowning,
my dad
obviously.
Couldn't swim.
I really don't like spiders. Any other bugs are fine. Pretty much. Earwigs, I'm not a real fan of earwigs, but whatever.
Yeah, earwigs kind of suck.
Yeah, they're kind of, they're the shitty insects. I don't like the shitty insects. But like, I can go outside and see a cicada or a stick bug or whatever, and go over and pick it up and let it crawl. I have no problem with that. Probably my biggest fear is, I do have a fear that at some point we will go through some sort of a reset. Like, and I don't, I'm trying not to channel Marshall Applewhite here because he was obviously fucking insane. But, the whole, like, at some point the earth is going to reset itself because we've damaged it so much and whatever. But I feel like eventually, like, we're going to get wiped out by some sort of like airborne event. Something
like
is going to happen.
Event.
Like for example, recently in China, there was like two people, got the bubonic plague.
Oh, I heard about that.
Yeah. Which I was like, where the hell did you go to get that? But like, I understand that, like, I guess the subways in New York City, like if you licked a subway platform in New York City, you would probably get the plague because it's that disgusting.
Yeah.
But I mean, just the idea that in China, you know, they have such a population density, that these two people could be afflicted with the bubonic plague of all things, the black freaking plague. Like, and that concept of, you know, well, it starts with two people and then it escalates and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So, I mean, a lot of my fears about like airborne illnesses and stuff like that, I mean, they absolutely started getting worse when people started making movies about it. Because before the movies happened, I was like, okay, you know, yeah, I mean, this is bad. You know, people could become afflicted with whatever, and it could be transmissible, and it could get really bad. And then, you know, there was Romero's Day of the Dead, and you're like, oh shit. Yeah, that could be really bad, couldn't it? So yeah, I mean, I feel like popular culture has definitely exacerbated the fear that I have of that. But I mean, even now, like if I'm traveling on a plane, if I'm in an airport, I don't touch my face. I am constantly using hand sanitizer. I've got like the wipes and everything. Like yeah. So I guess my biggest fear would probably be germs, as asinine as that sounds, because they're everywhere. But yeah, there's just something about that. I don't know. There's a reset.
Yeah, I can understand. I mean, it's funny. I've got a friend of mine called Carla. She's been on the podcast before, very early on, episode like 7 or something. And she is more into sort of the macabre and, you know, things that one would describe as weird or morbid, these sort of things. She loves skulls and all that sort of crazy stuff. Skulls aren't that crazy. I mean, I've got skull stuff as well. But, you know,
I have a few.
Yeah, exactly. They're amazing and they're very interesting.
They're great.
It's the best thing. All the coolest people have skulls. And so she has like sort of beliefs in she quite is into sort of numbers and numerology, and she's the number 3 is quite a big thing for her. She always mentions that, and there's a band we like called Fever 333, and I showed it to her, and she was like, "You knew I was going to like these guys straight away." And one of their songs, the start of it actually says, "What is it?" Like it's a little speech thing, like 20 seconds or whatever, and part of it goes, you know, what is it about the number 3? It's everywhere, no matter where you go, and you can go.
Right.
You know, it's one of those sort of. Get a numerology rabbit hole. But the point is with Carla, she said several times recently that kind of in jest, but kind of not at the same time, in the sense of sort of, if it happens, she'd be like, I told you so, but that doesn't mean she thinks it's 100% going to happen, but some sort of event, some sort of mass extinction event, whether or not it's going to be humans by, you know, bombing ourselves, or like another thing like Chernobyl, but much more extreme, or like even like asteroidal impact. Like if something came for us, you know, like what killed the dinosaurs or anything like that, we're gone. Like gone,
right.
You know, it's like if Yellowstone, if that erupts, they think that's going to erupt in the next few hundred or thousand years or whatever. It's like when that does, that's going to decimate a lot of America. It's like these little pockets of things that we obviously wouldn't even know about. It's like things could very easily like happen, like things we don't get killed quite a lot, but it's quite, when you see about what nature can do both with disease and things like that, and you've got it like, you know, the super flus that are becoming like, you know, immune to antibiotics and all these sorts of vaccines, and flu, I don't think could be affected by antibiotics, but you know, like diseases, MRSA that you can't, you try and do anything with them, and they're like super bugs now in hospitals. They're becoming immune to everything because, you know, try and get rid of them using this type of soap, and then the only ones that survive are the ones that are resistant to the soap, and then they start to, you know, it's all that sort of jazz. It's like the pandemic idea is a very real. I've seen like a documentary or two and sort of shows about it where they talk about it, and it's like it's actually really scary how easy it would be for something just like swine flu, and that was an epidemic over here, and bird flu and all these sorts of other things. It's like they could just like, you go through history, and there's been countless times where there's just been a big, you know, there's the Spanish flu, there was the bubonic plague, the Black Death, like just wipes loads of people out. And it's like, we've got better medicine now, but if we're making these super bugs that are basically resistant to everything, it's all going to take one or two things. It's just going to easily, you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I mean, I can honestly say that probably one of the most frightening times in my life. And I mean, I've gone to haunted locations. I have experiences with the paranormal, you know, I've done all that. But the thing that scared me the most was when, at my college, when I graduated with my bachelor's degree in 2013, and I think it was around 2011 or 2012, the H1N1, the swine flu. was going around and just seeing people walking around with like the masks on their faces. And just,
Yeah.
I mean, like for me, as somebody who is not keen on germs and whatever, and my wife, she has MS, so she has a compromised immune system.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I mean, I was like washing my hands constantly. I was like, I can't, mentally, I had a hard time dealing with it. And actually, I had a hard time in college that year too, because of all of that was going around. And then eventually, it started to kind of dissipate and kind of fade into the patchwork quilt of what everyday life is. But I mean, I lost my mind a little bit because I was so consumed by it. And I feel like there were a lot of other people too at the college who were like, this is crazy. This is going to turn into something else. Like, we have to be prepared. What are we going to do if something like this happens? And they had contingency plans, and like people in the dorms were starting to get, the swine flu. It was like a big thing. And I just, I could not handle it. It was truly like one of the most horrifying times of my life. And I've seen some shit. So for me, that was something.
And that's the end of part 1. Thanks as always for tuning in, guys. Part 2 will be out next week. If you're new to the show, it is released every Sunday. Normally the evening, sort of English time. So if you're in America, I don't know, afternoon-ish, I guess. America's quite a big place. And obviously, I want you guys to check out Janine's podcast, which is the ODDentity Podcast. I've included a link to that in the description. You should also check out Corvus Review if you're a bookworm or a literary nut or any sort of other vague description of someone who likes reading. Because, as I said in the start, she releases a quarterly... you can get all the back issues and things on the website. A quarterly release of sort of... I think it's just like written works, like short stories and short... there's poems in there. There's all kinds of cool stuff. I had a few browse of a few of them. So if you're into that sort of jazz, make sure you go check that out. I also mentioned that she's got an upcoming podcast called The Vanishing Hitchhiker. If you go over to ODDentity, especially the website I provided, if you go down to September 8th, which the episode September 8th, it shows there is an episode called The Preview of The Vanishing Hitchhiker. So Janine basically goes through what you can sort of expect. So if you like all those sort of things, make sure you go check out Janine's stuff. She's a really cool, interesting person, and I'm hoping to have her on the podcast at another time in the future, because we, as you can tell, had a great old chat. And coming up, I recently recorded a chat with a woman called Tracy Maxfield. Tracy is basically an inspirational woman. She's basically spent the last 5 or so years making sure that she goes to schools and talks to people about bullying and things. She's a big sort of proponent of people talking about mental health and all the sort of things, and not just, don't just give a kid pills and then leave them to it, as in, antidepressants and stuff. There's a lot more to it than that. She's gone through her own experience of depression and all kinds of other stuff. She gets into it in the podcast, and she has written a book called Escaping the Rabbit Hole. The rabbit hole is what she calls sort of falling into sort of depression, essentially. So, if you're into that sort of thing, then obviously next week is going to be part 2 of Janine. The week after that will probably be Tracy's. I've got 2 podcasts due in the next 2 weeks, one in the coming week and one the following week. They should be really fun and cool. Tracy hasn't explicitly said that she wants me to release her episode sooner or later, so it's I don't know, a lot of the time it just kind of gets to the night and I just think, what do I sort of fancy releasing at this time? So that's to look forward to. I've got a few other little things in the works, but I think I mentioned it before, I'm just trying not to overbook myself, because before what I was doing is booking like podcasts at 3 or 4 months in advance, and then some people would cancel because they either forgot or no longer could be bothered or whatever reason, and also then I'd be so unbelievably busy, then if there was an opportunity to come up where someone would be like, oh cool, can I be a guest on your show? Yeah, sure. When you free? 4 months down the line? No, thank you. So I'm aware of that's how it often happens, and I'm also aware that doing ridiculously long intros is also a way to fend off any new listeners. So instead, long outro. Huzzah. There's not the world... I'm trying to think if there's anything massive to mention at the moment. I keep meeting loads of new cool people, but I haven't had any podcasts with these cool people yet. I have mentioned I want to have a podcast with Reese at some point, but that is something I always want to do. I want to have podcasts with so many different people I know, because they're all such fun. But obviously there's loads of people around the world who are podcasters and do other cool, crazy stuff that I also want to chat to. So we'll see what comes our way. I've got a few collaborations during the works. I think there's potentially 2 podcasts that I'm going to be making appearances on, but I don't want to sort of talk about them yet because, I don't believe in jinxing necessarily, but it's just not really good etiquette for me to say, yeah, I'm going to be on this podcast at this time, yeah, and then something fall out and not happen, and then, that sort of jazz. And then I've also got something in the works with the guys in Comics in Motion. Not sure how much I will discuss at the moment, but it's to do with Star Wars, so that's fun. If you're into Star Wars and you like the Star Wars collaboration-y stuff, then you're probably going to enjoy this. But yeah, that's generally what it's going to be about, but I'll go into more detail of that when it's already been confirmed, and I know I'm going to be doing it, and the guys in comics are amazing. It's more so just, I don't want to say, hey guys, I'm doing this thing, and then loads of people go, yeah, cool, we can't wait to hear it, and then me be like, oh, well, I'm not even going to record an episode for like another month, because I'm busy, and, have a lot of other things to do. But that'll be a new little addition, if you can't get enough of my voice, which anyone who knows me, but personally, will probably never ever say that. They'll probably actually want a lot of distance, which is why most of my friends don't listen to my podcast. I'm basically rambling, so that's normally a good time to sort of hang up the mic, at least temporarily. So I'm going to go in a moment. I will just say, thanks as always for listening. I love each and every one of you listening to a podcast in any amount, and especially this far into it. Normally the end is just a rambly mess of nothingness. Follow on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. As I said in the intro, Instagram is usually just the best place. There's snippets of new episodes on there. There's movie reviews. There's cool photos of food and my tortoise and other such like, so go there. Facebook is a bit more minimalist. I just kind of post new episode snippets and movie reviews, and then Twitter I do like mini reviews because obviously 240 characters, so I can't really write a full-on review in that. So Twitter's kind of sharing other podcaster stuff. So if you want podcast recommendations, then head over to my Twitter, and there will be loads of them. I think that is everything. I'm sure something will pop up that I forget, and then I'll regret not putting it in, and I probably still won't put it in, because I am tired. It's on a Sunday, and I've spent the whole weekend in Wales, so I am shattered. Been driving a lot. I think yesterday we were driving for like 7 hours in total, but it was lots of fun, and there's a new potential podcast guest, Huzzah, who's a very interesting, cool guy. But can't get into that yet, because that's not going to happen for many, many months. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching, even though you didn't watch anything because you listened. Unless you're on YouTube and then you just watch that little bar go up and down with the equalizer voice thingy. This is far too much rambly nonsense, isn't it, for a podcast even of my caliber. I will just say, if you're listening this far, it probably means you enjoy the show, which is good. If you could, share on social media, recommend to your friends, look through the back catalogue if you've only listened to this one episode or only listened to a couple of episodes, because I don't really have a specific subject. I just kind of talk to whoever I find interesting. That is, I've spoken to blind filmmakers, comedians, Magister of the Church of Satan, other podcasters, authors, filmmakers, CEOs. There's all kinds of different people I've spoken to about a wide variety of different things. So be sure to check out the back catalogue to look at those sort of things. Basically, almost no one listens on YouTube ever. It's got like 2 or 3 views per video-ish. But I do put things in playlists there. So if you're a big listener and you want to know what to listen to, but you don't have to trawl through, there's now more than 100 releases. So if you don't want to trawl through all that, just go on YouTube, go on my playlists on the Genuine Chit-Chat page, channel on YouTube, isn't it? And on there I've put them into, I think, there's comedic chats, there's ones about mental health, there's ones about travel, there's ones about movies, there's ones with fellow podcasters, there's entrepreneurial chats, I think is one of them as well. So I've and sciencey ones. So that's general-ish categories to listen to. So check those things out. Share if you can. Share if you think it deserves it. Show other people. I do really appreciate that. And spreading this by word of mouth is amazing. I love each and every one of you so very, very much. I would give you all a hug. So that's enough from me, guys. And I'll talk to you guys next week.